Well, at some point, businesses usually get to the point to which they want to expand internationally, whether it be to keep up with competitors or it's to access additional customers and kind of broaden their consumer base. There's a number of things that businesses can do to expand into international markets. And typically, their expansion opportunities vary in terms of the risk that they incur, as well as the amount of control that businesses have. And so usually businesses don't jump right into a very significant level of involvement. Usually they kind of ease into it, if you will, and then gradually increase their exposure. And so typically how this would work is businesses oftentimes start with a exporting type business. And so by exporting, what we're really referring to is a business essentially selling some type of domestic products overseas. And this is kind of the most limited in terms of risk. And the reason it's very, very low risk is because your capital requirements are very, very minor at this point. Really, you're purchasing or you're building your own products in your domestic territory where you usually operate, and then you're shipping those to other areas of the world. And so your risk is minimized because if something goes wrong, it's very easy to get out of this type of business because you haven't purchased leases and different things overseas. You don't have to get accustomed to a certain sociocultural differences and different things of that nature because you're conducting all of your operations for the most part in your home country. You're simply just shipping them overseas. Usually for an exporting type business, what you'll usually use is what we call an independent agent. And this is the individual who is going to go ahead and sell your products and services. And this is good because they're more familiar with obviously the different traditions and kind of norms and ways of doing business in certain cultures that your business may not be privy to, may not be aware of. And so you can certainly leverage their expertise in this particular area. That's a very good benefit of using an independent agent, obviously. But the issue, though, is that you give up control. And because this agent is independent, they obviously sell a number of different products. And so they're not necessarily working for you. They earn a commission based upon what they sell. But you need to be very careful here because the independent agent is going to portray the products in a way that's going to best benefit them, if that makes sense. And so what could happen there is they may present your products and your company in such a manner that may not be favorable to you. It may not be consistent with what your brand is or what the brand image you're trying to portray. And so a lack of control is a very, very significant issue going this particular route. But once again, the trade-off, of course, is I have very, very minimal risk associated with this type of business. All right, so if you wanted to escalate your level of involvement, you could move on to kind of licensing and franchising. And they look very similar, but there actually is a difference between the two. Licensing, very specifically, is just giving someone really just the authority to produce or market a particular product of yours. And if you think about it this way, using sports leagues like the National Basketball Association and the National Football Association, right? You can essentially license those. So essentially you would pay a licensing fee to the NFL and the NBA. And then you would have the opportunity to use their elements, right? The logos for the teams within those leagues and all those different other things. Otherwise, you obviously would be infringing upon that intellectual property. But you pay a fee associated with actually using those images and different things like that if you were to make like t-shirts or hats or whatever the case is. Okay. Now, franchising is maybe a little more extreme, I guess you might say. Franchising is not only giving you the ability to produce or market certain products, right? You're getting the right to do those things just like licensing, but you're also given the ability to use them under operating requirements, which is the difference there. And so specifically with franchising, usually like restaurants, for example, can be franchises. Certain types of businesses can be a franchise. And so not only are you have the ability to produce and market a particular product, but you're also given certain operating requirements, which are kind of a way of conducting business. And so one of the most popular franchisors is McDonald's. And so in order to be a franchisor with McDonald's, you have to follow, obviously, very, very strict operating procedures. You get a large manual full of all the things that you can do and all the different rules that you have to abide by and how to do certain things like cook hamburgers, assemble them, how to address customers, everything under the sun, really. It's trying to be all-inclusive because what they're trying to do is minimize inconsistencies. And this is very characteristic with a lot of fast food restaurants and other restaurants for that matter. And so what they want is that when you go into a McDonald's, regardless of where it's at geographically, for you to have the same type of experience, to experience the food the same way, the same service, and those different things. What they don't want is to go to a restaurant and to have different things and experiences at all of those different restaurants. There should be a consistency there. It's also meant to minimize their risk because they want to make sure that the brand is being portrayed in a positive light. So you're doing things according to their pre-established procedures and ways of actually doing them. So where licensing, you're merely having the ability to produce and market. In franchising, you're giving the operating ability to actually conduct business a certain way. And obviously that benefits the franchisee because they know how to actually do business and run a successful company. But that also benefits the franchisor because they ensure that a certain consistent level of service is provided and a certain product is provided that is consistent across all of their different brand elements. Okay. So in addition to licensing, another opportunity, I guess I should say, in the international arena is to utilize what we call direct investments. And a direct investment is really the actual company is acquiring some type of business internationally, or actually developing their own facilities. And so this obviously requires the greatest amount of capital expenditures because you are specifically purchasing businesses that are international already and then acquiring them and then obviously using them under your brand, or you're going to be developing and building your own. Either way, you're going to pay a lot of money to do that. And so in terms of risk, you could argue that this is probably the most risky form of international involvement or development because of the fact that you're paying a lot of money to actually do this, okay? And also, the ramifications associated with not being successful are pretty significant because it would take you a great deal to get out of those particular arrangements, especially after purchasing property, building plants, purchasing equipment, hiring employees. It's very, very difficult to get out of, okay? Now, on the other hand, you do have a great deal of control, and that's really where you want to kind of look at these on an actual spectrum is in relation to not only the risk you get, but also the control that you receive here. So some common types of direct investment, you can do a number of different things. You can just strictly, as I mentioned before, purchase actual facilities. You can do what we refer to as joint ventures. Which is actually reaching an agreement with a particular company that already operates internationally, typically a domestic firm, and then kind of joining forces with them for the purpose of actually, not necessarily combining companies. You're not merging per se, but you're just joining to service a particular consumer base. And so the reason that you would do that is you're going to have the ability to take advantage of their expertise in that market. So let's say you expand and you're going to operate in China, but really you have no understanding of the Chinese consumer, what their interests are, what their values are. You don't speak the language. And so what you could do is you could obviously directly invest in the country, but obviously establish a joint venture. So you're partnering with a Chinese firm to kind of help you navigate some of the territory there, because there's going to be a period to which you have to get accustomed to the way business is done there that usually you don't have right off the bat. And so a joint venture could be beneficial for that very reason, to leverage their expertise with the Chinese consumer. Now, going back to kind of the relationship between risk and control, Starbucks kind of struggled with this when they were developing, internationally and kind of extending the reach of their particular brand, because on the front side, they really considered franchising to be a viable option there. And the reason is what you could do it for very, very low upfront costs, right? Someone's going to basically pay you to run your business. You're just giving them ability to use your logo, to use your operating procedures, to find out how you produce certain things. And they're actually doing it. So they're investing heavily in running the company. They're staffing, they're all doing all those things. But as the kind of the theme with all of these is, the big issue for them was this area of control. By allowing a franchisee to take ownership and choosing who to hire and choosing, different things like that. Yeah, as a franchisor, can you provide guidelines and strict regulations? Of course you can. But ultimately, it's going to be them having that face-to-face interaction with the customer. And Starbucks, their mentality is they need to maintain trust with their partners, right? Basically employees, but they refer to them as partners. And by having trust with the partners would develop trust with customers. And so they felt that going a licensing or franchising route per se wouldn't be beneficial to what they're trying to accomplish, and also wouldn't allow for the same level of consistency that they desired with that type of operations. So these are certainly a few of the things that businesses have kind of as a opportunity or option, if you will, when determining whether or not to expand internationally. There are a few others that I obviously did not mention, but these are some primary opportunities that businesses have, and they can extend their brand and their reach to consumers on an international level.